All right, we are here. I got Chris again this week. We have had Mike last week. We've got, I think, Audra coming up. She's going to talk with us about a little bit stuff next week, so it should be good. But yeah, today we're talking a little bit about the ministry aspect of small groups and really of the church. And when we're talking about ministry, we're talking more about how do the people within the church serve each other and help each other out.
So ministering to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And ministry really was, I mean, that word really is talking about things, right? It was really talking about making this physical life better. And then we've kind of changed it into this kind of bigger picture. But ministry really is that idea of how are you helping each other in this kind of worldly way, or how are you helping other people in this worldly way? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, God calls us. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. God tells us that people outside will know that we're Christians by the way that we love each other.
Right.
The way that we love other Christians.
Right.
And we see this kind of, we see this happen. Then we see all these calls in Acts and Romans and these other spots where God kind of tells us what this church community is kind of supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And then I look around sometimes and I think, we're not always doing a great job at that. But sometimes we are. And we were talking about stories earlier today about, times that we have seen church people support church people in pretty insane ways. So what we want to talk about today is we're looking at Acts 4 and Acts 6 a little bit, and kind of this idea of how you view your belongings, your time, your energy, the stuff that you have, and then also how we bless other people within the church with it. So just let me kind of start out just kind of asking you and looking at this question of why do you think that the followers of Jesus were kind of able to look at their stuff and not feel like it was their stuff?
Well, I mean, the simple answer, which I think is also the real answer, uncomplicated in a respect, is they recognized immediately that God was the source of their whatever stuff. Not that God is all about stuff, but that he equips people with physical goods, with spiritual gifts, with all the different things that they might need to minister to other people within the church and without the church. But since our purview today is within the church, I mean, you know, God's the supplier.
Right.
Name it. He's the supplier of foodstuffs. He's the supplier of monetary goods. He's the supplier of even health, right, of time. A moment ago, before we started recording, we were talking about kind of ways that we assume that time. I think we assume that we have time.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Like we assume that.
And we don't even think about giving it away.
Right.
Because we got so much
assume
of it.
This afternoon I'm going to be able to whatever.
Oh, I see what
or
you're
I'm going to wake up tomorrow or next week or this week, and I don't know that. I don't think that's wise.
Right.
I think it's good to plan.
Right.
But like, there's no guarantee that I make it to 3:30 today.
Right.
Now I don't want to scare anybody or be
Right.
thinking doom stuff.
Right.
But that's the reality of it. Like, I can't assume my time is mine.
Yeah.
So. All of these things then are the Lord's. My time is his. It's like he paid for it, but how did he pay for it? He paid for it with Jesus on the cross, but he also paid for it by creating it in the first place.
Right.
And making it for me to access.
Right.
Right.
So what's it look like? This maybe goes back to a question I asked a couple weeks ago, but what's it look like to really view your possessions, your time, and that kind of stuff as God's stuff? What's that kind of look like in action in terms of how you choose to spend that stuff? Well, we'll start there, and then I'm also curious about the question, and this is the one I think goes back, is what causes you to not do that? What causes you to start thinking that it's your stuff?
Sure. So it's tricky, isn't it? Because we, as children, little children, we're encouraged to share. So there's something selfish inherent in our flesh,
right?
Inherent in our humanness, right? So we have this mentality of this is mine, that's mine,
right.
mine, 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 mine. we label things, even things at that age, even things that aren't ours.
Yeah, they're our parents, right?
Or they're yours, but I can take it and then it's mine.
Yeah.
Well, that's a 3-4-year-old mentality.
Right.
But some of us never quite grow out of it.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, and I think we make excuses for collecting.
Right.
Or we don't understand the usefulness in the kingdom of having resources.
What do you mean?
What I mean is, let's say I've got a big bank account. I actually currently don't really, but if I had a big bank account, it's not so that I can just sit on top of a big bank account.
Right.
It's so that I can be helpful in a ministerial way in the
kingdom growth.
Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Kingdom growth, by the way, whenever we talk about kingdom growth, we're kind of referencing, the kingdom, obviously, but also, Lord's Prayer, that kingdom come, that kind of stuff, where people are becoming believers, people are feeling loved. So just if you ever hear kingdom growth.
No, I can, and I mean, it is more complicated than probably it ought to be.
Yeah.
But, through prayer and reading the Word and all that stuff, you kind of understand what purposes God's resources can fulfill.
Right.
Right?
Right.
What His intentions might be.
Right.
For somebody with money or somebody who's a farmer and has maybe extra, grows extra. I mean, the Bible speaks specifically about different instances where people have abundance.
Right.
And that's God's measure of giving, by the way. So he's not short.
Right.
He's not going to shortchange you. He's not going to shortchange me.
Right.
And the invitation biblically is, think about how God provides for just the lilies in the field. Think about how God provides for the sparrows.
Right.
Think about how God provides, this and that and the other thing for these little things.
Right.
And He loves us and created us with even more purpose than that.
Right.
So how much more will He provide for us? Yeah. But we don't believe it.
Yeah.
Frequently.
Well, we don't know what it means, I think, sometimes too. Because I think you look at the 11 disciples, and this is so. I was thinking about Luke a little bit, because of the cost of following Christ, right? The cost of being a disciple, which is, essentially, don't value anyone or anything as highly as you value God, and be willing to do whatever He calls you to do, right? Which could include laying down your life, which 11 of the disciples do in a more intense way, right?
Yeah, apart from John, they all
exiled, right?
Yeah, sacrificed basically.
Right, and they and God provided for all of them,
right?
Even though they died,
right?
And I think that's a little bit of the challenge. And this is heavy stuff that we're talking about right now, but
it's real though. This is the kingdom.
It's the kingdom, and it's why we're willing to give so much away, because I can give away. I can give away my stuff, my energy, my time, my life, physically, my literal life, and die, and be okay, because God provides for me.
Exactly.
And I think that's a little bit, man, and to stay there. And this is where, the small group and that kind of stuff comes in. This is a very difficult thing to do.
I think, yeah.
And it's that spot where... with people around you encouraging you and supporting you and reminding you that God provides, we're a little bit more able to be the people who God kind of created us to be. Spirit's working in us already, so He's always doing His thing.
For sure.
But having those people around us, I think, reminds us, like Paul, like we talked about last week with Paul to Timothy, to fan into flame the faith that we have. Right. Man, and so I'm thinking about that. How do we? So let me maybe ask this in practicality. What does it look like a little bit for you to say, my life isn't my own, my stuff isn't my own? How do you go about figuring out how much time and stuff to give to your fellow church people?
So it's tricky, right?
Believers?
Because there's a scripture that talks about give to anyone who asks.
Yeah.
And there aren't any qualifiers on that, which is a huge challenge to me.
Right.
So, and what I mean by that is I don't get to choose who asks.
Yeah.
Or what they're asking for.
Right.
Right? So if someone asks me for my coat, I'm under that scripture, I'm obliged to give it to them.
Yeah.
Because it's not mine anyway.
Yeah.
And I want to live out of that mindset. Do I do it? Probably not very well at all.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy you're going to be like, well, man, he's doing it.
Yeah.
I think once in a while I sort of trip into it and I'm like, oh yeah, I got to do that.
Yeah.
I told a story maybe 4 or 5 years ago about I was downtown and I ran into a homeless guy, and he it was kind of a nice day, and he was, you know, he was collecting things in a grocery cart. And the long story short is I just felt provoked by the Holy Spirit to turn around and do something for that guy, and I didn't have anything but like my credit card. So, but we walked by like a sandwich shop, and so I asked him if he was hungry, and he said, yeah. I said, can I buy you, lunch?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, please. And I didn't stand there and give him the gospel, and I didn't stand there and say, so what church you go to? I mean,
right.
Clearly he lived like in a doorway.
Right.
And I'm not saying I bought this guy lunch and it should be like, hey, look at me. I'm saying in a moment when the Lord said, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Because I really felt compelled, right? It wasn't, I couldn't ignore this guy.
Right.
There was a spirit moment.
Right.
And I thought, okay, I need to not ignore this guy. I need to look after this guy. Now, I don't know if he's a believer or not.
Right.
And we're talking today, sorry everybody, we're talking today about the ministry of believers, that's legit too, so don't misunderstand.
Yeah, and don't worry, we'll get
Don't misunderstand.
In future weeks we'll get there.
But I wanted to be obedient.
Right.
And so that was a moment when I was. But then in my mind, I wrote about it a little bit, I blogged about it, I talked to a few people about it, and then I thought, well, now I'm making a big deal out of it when I should have I just owned that and just done it, and that's what I should have done. But the Lord said, hey, use what resources you do have, give what you do have to minister to this person. I'm provoked by I'm provoked by the end of this movie, Schindler's List, where Oskar Schindler had given his life away and his work and his possessions and everything, and he saved, I think, it was either 1,500 or 2,500 Jewish people from death during World War II in the middle of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the movie is the end of the war, and a bunch of these people are leaving, and they're saying, thank you, you helped us greatly, and you freed us, and we're alive because of you. And he looks at this like gold stick pin that's on. He's got one suit left, and he's wearing it. Right? He's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the clothes on his back, and he looks at this gold stick pin, and he goes, "This could have been one more person."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't want to have that experience.
Right.
Now, he helped so many.
Right.
But I don't want to have even that moment of regret. Like, man, I should have helped Zach.
Right.
So I feel like at some level I'm going to be accountable for those things one day.
No,
and one pastor I know said it this way. He said, don't ask God what you should give. Ask God what you should keep.
It's actually a good reflection question. So there's a couple things. I really like that reflection question to say, all right, how much do I need?
Right.
And I'll live off that. And then I'll with the other stuff that I have, maybe I'll save it, and that way in case somebody ever comes and they need X dollars, I have it saved and I can give it to them or whatever. Or maybe I'll just give it away every month. I'll find an organization and give that away, or I'll tithe it, or not tithe it, but I'll donate to the church.
Offering, yeah.
I'll offer. And I like that mindset because it helps you to stay focused. One thing that I really, and this is a part of the reason that we're talking about it today, is because I think one of the things you just have to do is you have to reflect on it, pray on it, and make plans on it. Because I think when you don't make those plans, you don't reflect on it, things just happen, and suddenly they're not the things that you really want to be happening, right? So it's like, oh man, I spent $100 last month on McDonald's. Like,
right.
If you talked to me last month, I wouldn't have said, you know what I want to do next month? Spend $100 on McDonald's.
Exactly.
You
don't see somebody budgeting for that.
And so if I reflect on that and plan on that, and I reflect on who God is and who I am and what he's called me to do, now I start to think, okay, how do I want to use this money? Who do I really want to bless? Mm-hmm. And I know that there's people out there who they've got this list of like, my family is my main priority, mm-hmm. and then my neighbors, yep. or my church, or my small group, or whatever. And I'm going to kind of bless those people in that order. And then I'm going to maybe have like an extra whatever where if people come up to me and are in need, I can just kind of help that out too.
Sure.
Right. So I'm not going to I'm going to plan, so I'm not living paycheck to paycheck so that I can give, so I can help people out. And I think about this too when I think about like young people. I work a lot with young people in the church and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I think about the community that they have, or maybe the lack of community that they've had at the church. Because people aren't necessarily at times putting money where their mouth is.
Right.
And I think about that we were sharing stories before about people who we have who have made big sacrifices for us.
Yes.
Or who have made big sacrifices for other people just in order to help them pay bills, or in order to help cover expenses, or I mean even different things, or it wasn't even a money thing, but they really helped each other out, and how much stronger our community is because of that.
Totally.
With other believers.
Yep.
And if we're thinking about that in terms of our small group, and making sure that our small group has that community where they know that we love them, we know that we're praying for them, but they also know that if something goes bad, we kind of have their back.
Yeah.
And I look at this like these people didn't view their stuff as their own, and if something went wrong with people in their church community, they'd potentially sell their house,
right,
or find a way to support those people.
Yeah.
And I think about how often we're doing things like that. And honestly, I do want to be careful because it probably happens more than the average church person thinks.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens a good amount.
Yeah.
But people don't go out and brag about it, rightfully so. But so it does happen a good amount, but man, if we could continue to support each other in that way, where if somebody's out of town, we're just like, if you're in their small group, you're the first person to go like watch their house and make sure the house doesn't get broken
into.
So
yes, and I'm thinking about it this way: if a small group, even if it's just starting, or if it's been a small group for a decade or whatever. Right. The idea is to worship Jesus together, build trust with each other. Basically, you're sort of creating a family, like a smaller part of the family.
Absolutely.
Of believers. But the difference is, if you can contrast that with your actual family, there's more intentionality in the small group family than often in just a family unit, right? And so people grow up and sort of grow out of a family unit, and some folks in there might be reliable and some might not for helping others.
Right.
But in a church community, small group style family,
right,
you're talking about people who are looking after each other.
Right.
Intentionally.
Right.
Not planning to grow up and grow out,
right,
in the same way.
Right.
So it's almost like the people say, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Well, this is that. This is like you're kind of picking your family in a way.
In a way. Yeah.
In a way. And I think God knits people together, right?
Yeah.
He brings people together.
Yeah.
It's the word says that God sets the lonely in families, and I think that speaks to a lot of different levels, whether it's adoption or just, people marrying into families. But it's that intentionality of small group kind of families too.
Right.
For sure.
You think about this a little bit, and I know we got to wrap up here in a sec, but you think about this intentionality. I can only control myself. So I'm going to try to be intentional with myself, that I grow and I reflect on things, that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to try and be intentional with my immediate family, right, with Darcy. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to take that and kind of think, all right, what's that next group? And God certainly calls us as a church to be that body, to be that family. I mean, one unified unit. And one of the reasons we do small groups here is because we're a little bit of a bigger church, and we can't know everybody. So we want everybody to know some people and have that church family in an intentional kind of close way. And
I mean, we need each other, and it's
We need
not.
each other.
We do. We need each other. It's like not a question.
Right.
And if you don't know about that, or if you doubt it, or if you're thinking, I don't know, that might not be true, try it.
Right.
The thing, like for example, men's ministry around here is full of experienced men who will testify. The little motto that we use is men in isolation tend to self-destruct. And I'm not saying you should test that, but honestly, as a person who's tried to test that, it's true.
Yeah.
So if isolation tends towards self-destruction,
Right.
then be intentional in getting a community, a small community.
Right.
There's nothing like quick stories in that 2 or 3 different times in my life, weird things have happened where finances might have been necessary in a hurry.
Right.
We try to be responsible, but at the same time, something huge comes up.
Can't always be prepared.
Can't always be prepared. And 3 times that I can speak to, one of them was massive, but 3 times that I can speak to where church family came in and said, help us. What's the deal? What's the plan? I was able to articulate all those things, and they said, oh, we can totally help.
Right.
And then within a certain amount of time, it was months, a few months went by, and we were able to contribute back.
Yeah.
In some instances, it was payback. In some instances, it was, this is a gift, don't worry about it, and whatever it took.
Right.
And we've been able then to invest into, and we're not people of
Right.
those kinds of resources always, but somehow God makes a way.
Right.
God makes a way.
Well, and I want to jump in real quick, just because I know a few of those stories, and then we'll wrap. But you were attempting to serve, I think, people outside of the church, and through that, you were giving some of your possessions away and some of your time and efforts away, and that caused some issues, which we know happens, right? That as we're trying to serve God, we run low, and then something happens to us, and where we just kind of need to support each other.
Yeah.
And this is even what is kind of happening in the Bible, where these people are going and sharing the gospel for God, or they're doing something like that, and then they're being arrested or persecuted, and they don't have a place to stay, or they don't have any money, and they need money in order to pay court fees, lawyers, to try and get each other out and try and support each other. And so it's pretty fascinating. One thing I want you guys thinking about for small groups and small group leaders, but even members, just are you reflecting on why you're doing what you're doing with the money that you have and the resources that you have and the time that you have, the energy that you have? How are you using that to bless other followers of Christ? Kind of knowing that people outside are going to look and say, wow, those people are so loving towards each other. There's something special there.
Yeah.
They must be Christian. They must be people who follow Christ. It's the only reason you would be that loving and sacrificial. And then potentially too, what's your commitment to the small group? How are you kind of committing to help and bless the small group with your time, your energy, your resources?
Yeah.
So it's good to know kind of what to expect from each other and what to give to each other. And that's really just what I want small groups to be thinking about a little bit this week and talking a little bit about this week. How are you kind of committing to bless each other, and how are you going to help each other? This goes back to discipleship, but how are you going to help each other remember that your resources aren't yours?
Yeah.
Everything you have is, even your time, your energy, your health, your life, it's God's.
Yep.
And you want to use that to the absolute best that you can. So small groups, leaders and participants, thanks for jumping in today. Continue that kind of conversation, just kind of wrestling with some of those questions that we have down. And hope it works out well for you guys. Thanks.